Okay, first of all, I just want to thank you so much for many of you joining us at the soul-stirring Christmas last Sunday night right here in this room. Man, we had so much fun, it was embarrassing. It was a really, really, really great fun. I sang, and so there's that. And so if you didn't come, maybe you were the smart ones, really, come to think of it. But we had a great, great time. There's going to be more of the same on Wednesday and Thursday of this week at our Christmas Eve services. And of course, we want to see you back and bring friends and family. We'd love to have you. We are in an Advent series here at Hope, focused upon a great passage in Isaiah 9. Advent is kind of a weird word, really. It's not a word we often use in normal conversation. The word itself is taken from the Latin, and it simply means coming or arrival. Like if I were to use it in a sentence, I might say, much has changed since the advent of television, since the arrival of television. In the church sense, Advent is the 4-week period of expectant waiting before the arrival of Christmas. I mean, you will be tested on this. You realize that, right? So I hope you're writing this down. So that's what Advent is. Back to Isaiah 9, verse 6. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government will be upon his shoulder. And his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. I want to talk about the very beginning of that verse today. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. I mean, that's what this season is all about. It's about a baby in a manger. And according to this passage, a baby directed to whom? See, we often jump right past this, but the baby is intended for us. Unto us a child is born. Unto us a son is given. In other words, for our benefit, a child is born. For our benefit, a son is given. That's an important thing to realize. You know, on very rare occasions, I wear a clerical collar, a wedding here, a funeral there on occasion. I have Catholic and Episcopal colleagues who wear a collar every day from morning to night. But it's a little odd for me, frankly. Not the funeral or the wedding ceremony, that's fine. It's the stopping by Walgreens on the way part that is weird. Or pumping gas after the funeral part. Because when you have a collar on, there's very little question about where you're coming from, right? And so a guy in a polo shirt cutting you off in traffic is one thing, but a guy in a collar doing it, something altogether different. So you got to be very, very careful. Now, some of you may recall that Craig and I went to New York City 3 weeks after 9/11 as part of a counseling team from. It was unforgettable experience. And I spent the whole week in a clerical collar. Bob Russell, one of our staff guys, ordered a couple of clerical shirts and collars for us. Why would we do that? Well, we not only wanted to be available, but we wanted to be obvious in our faith because we were declaring something, right? When somebody in a collar asks, how you doing, it means something other than the how you doing you normally get from people. Our hotel was 3 blocks from ground zero. It was a tough time still. It was still smoking. It was just hard, you know. But most of the counseling we did actually was on Long Island, where the families of the victims lived. And we'd spend all day on Long Island, and then we'd catch the train back to Manhattan at night. The trains ran every 20 minutes until 11 p.m., and then from 11 p.m. until 6 a.m., they ran every hour on the hour. And on one particular night, Craig had already traveled back to Manhattan, and I was running like a maniac to catch the 11 o'clock. And as I rounded the corner, there it was sitting in the station, and as soon as I hit the platform, it started to pull away. Now, I don't know if you've spent any time in New York, but when a train pulls away from the platform, it is gone. You can scream and wave all you want, but in my experience, that just makes it go faster away from you. So I just stopped and I watched and I set my backpack down. Then all of a sudden, the train stopped. It stopped and a little window opened up, and the engineer stuck his head out and said, "Father, come on." That is a bad collar right there, buddy. I don't know exactly what my Catholic priest friends do at that time, but I was giving it all I had. I did the whole thing. So I made my way onto this, frankly, pretty empty train, and I found a quiet seat in the back of the train. And at that time, I don't know how they do it exactly now, they check the tickets like the old days with this little conductor guy walking through, punching your card, or whatever it is, however they do it, they punch cards. And so the conductor says, "Can I talk to you when I get done?" I said, "Sure." And a few minutes later, he comes back, and I asked him to sit down, and for the next 30 minutes, all the way into Penn Station, it was just the conductor and me in the quiet of the train, talking about God and our lives and our families and our problems. I will never forget that ride. Part of the reason I will never forget it is that this moment of quiet reflection took place in the busiest city in the world. Well, welcome to the busiest time of the year. Welcome to America's holiday chaos. I want to talk to us today about taking a seat for just a minute. Because there are times in our lives when we just need to sit down. Times in our lives when we need to stop and take a breath. And I would love for today to be that sort of moment for us. I want us to pull up a seat by the manger for a few minutes. Does that image work for you at all? I mean, over the course of our years, we've had a few nativity scenes in our home, but none of them really had chairs by them. I want our mental nativity scene today to have a chair by it. Because I think there are times in our lives when we need to take a seat at the manger. Why? Well, several reasons come to mind. The first is this: some of us just need to rest. We just need to rest. I love going shopping and seeing the little lounge chairs that the businesses create. They put this little lounge area together so that the patrons can catch their breath. It's usually guys sitting there, right? Guys like me. But some of us need to stop by the manger to catch our breath. To catch our breath and think, how's your year been? Not so red hot? You exhausted by it? The manger is the perfect place to get refreshed. How so? Well, to me, there's nothing more restful than a resting baby. I used to go into my kids' rooms to watch them sleep. They were so peaceful. They were so peaceful, it made me peaceful. I'd go in there and sit down, just watch them sleep. In fact, I did that just last night with my wife, Patty. I pulled up a chair and just watched her sleep for a couple of hours. Man, I'm kidding. That's creepy, isn't it? Man, that is so weird. And y'all really believed it for a second, right? She is frankly not that peaceful, really, when she sleeps. But check this out. The baby in the manger would grow up to say these words in Matthew 11. Jesus said, "Are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me. Get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you." You know, I know it's hard this time of year, but some of us need to rest by that manger this year. What else might prompt us to take a seat? Some of us might need to take a seat at the manger to learn. To learn. When I used to teach high school American history, at the top of the hour, the bell would ring. And what would that mean? It would mean that it was time to sit down and learn. We take a seat when we learn. We sit in a classroom or we sit at a desk or we sit in a library. Is there something that this baby might have to teach you? But here's a legitimate question. Do you feel like a baby yourself in this faith deal? Sometimes we only think about our faith around Christmas and Easter. In fact, this week we will have thousands upon thousands of people in this room at multiple services, many of whom only think about their faith at Christmas time and Easter. And if that's the case, the manger is not a bad place to start your journey. I love what Paul said in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 13. We don't have to rely on the world's guesses and opinions. We didn't learn this by reading books or going to school. We learned it from God, who taught us person to person through Jesus. Listen, if you're intimidated by the Bible or theology or about thinking in terms of God, you need to get over that. You need to relax. You need to relax. Years ago, we started a program with inner city kids that we called Read to Succeed. It was very, very simple. Adults would sit down with kids and read. The adult would read some, the kid would read some. If the child was a third grader, we'd grab a book that was meant for a third grader. If the child struggled at all with it, we'd smile and say, let's get back to that one a little bit later. And we'd grab a simpler book. If that one was too hard, we'd find a simpler one than that. We'd do that till we found a book the child could read, and we'd read it. And you know what? Just about every time, eventually, we'd get back to that original book that we had chosen, and by then, he or she would read that book just fine. Learning about God needs to be like that. Don't grab a seminary book when what you need is a little devotional book. Don't try to figure out Revelation, which I can't figure out, when you need to first read the Gospel of John. So we sit to rest. We sit to learn. And here's an interesting reason to sit. I think about it every time I go to a sporting event. Some of us need to take a seat so other people can see. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. There is this incredible ball game going on 50 feet away, but you can't see it because somebody in front of you is exercising his or her right to stand up to watch. Happens at concerts too. Sometimes I think that we're worrying so much about seeing Jesus ourselves that we forget that there are others who need to see him too. And our exuberance to see, in a strange way, sometimes we block others from seeing. I love this little story in Luke 19. It's one I remember as a child. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but being a short man, he could not because of the crowd. Wouldn't it have been nice if there had been someone in the crowd who could have just knelt down, maybe just sat down, just sacrificed a tiny bit so that Zacchaeus could have seen? Maybe we need to sacrifice just a little bit so that others might see Jesus. After all, it's not about us anyway. It's about the baby. Now, okay, that's a weird concept. How do we do that practically? Well, here's one thought. Sometimes we get very set in our ways and in our faith. For instance, we might love what we got going on at the Christmas Eve services for our family. We've got our family routine down. We've been doing it for years and years, and we don't much want to change it. So we always come to the 3 o'clock service, and then we always go to El Porton, get the quesadilla mexicana with extra guac. That's just what we do. Don't change it. That's who we are. That's what we do. But what about my neighbor Zacchaeus? He recently lost his wife. He seems to really be hurting. Maybe this year we get him in a position to see the manger, not just us. We figure out what service might work for him. Or we could even look at what we always do and just include him in the whole deal. Quesadilla, Mexicana, and all. Extra guac. Think about that. How can we make it easier for other people to see God? Why else might we need to sit by the manger? One more. Some of us need to take a seat to heal. Simply to heal. Sometimes as we sit, rest is all that is needed. We just need to rest for a minute, catch our breath before we get right back in the game. But sometimes something more than rest is needed. Healing is needed. Sometimes as we sit, we need to be tended to. We need to be tended to, and that may be your situation today. You come here today not to rest or to learn or to let somebody else see your Jesus. You come here today for healing because you're broken in one way or another. Your marriage is falling apart, or your job is about to play out, or you're battling cancer, or one of your kids is off the rails, or you know you're drinking or drugging too much. And see, that's where the manger intersects with the cross. Two great images of the Christian faith, the manger and the cross. But understand, our greatest healing does not come from the manger. Our greatest healing doesn't come in Jesus' appearing. It comes in his leaving. It comes in his death and in his resurrection. I mean, the Christmas narrative, as absolutely beautiful as it is an incomplete narrative. I mean that's true of all of us, though, right? Your birth narrative is an incomplete narrative. Abraham Lincoln's log cabin birth narrative is interesting, but it's a very incomplete narrative. That log cabin wasn't Lincoln's legacy. God's narrative in our lives may begin at our birth, but when we leave this planet, it's what he's done over the course of our years that yields the proper story of our lives. And for many of us today, part of that story needs some healing. Paul writes these words in 2 Corinthians 4. So we're not giving up. How could we? Even though on the outside it often looks like things are falling apart on us, on the inside, where God is making new life, not a day goes by without his unfolding grace. These hard times are small potatoes compared to the coming good times, the lavish celebration prepared for us. There's far more here than meets the eye. The things we see now are here today, gone tomorrow, but the things we can see now will last forever. So therefore, late that night in New York, the train pulled into Penn Station, and the conductor that I'd been sitting with shook my hand, and then he stood up to go. And he said it had been a long time since he sat and talked about God. He smiled and said, "This feels pretty good, actually." And I said, "Good. Do it some more." Sometime this week, my prayer for you is that you'll take a seat by the manger and rest there, or learn there, or start to get healed there. Whatever it is that you need. And then when the new year begins, do it some more. See, that's what the Christian life is. It's only as complicated as you make it. It's pretty simple. Meeting God, following God, staying current with God. Meeting God, following God, staying current with God. And I'll be honest with you. For many of us here at Hope on staff, us pastor types and staff here, Christmas is hard to pull up a chair by the manger. It's just busy. We got a lot on our minds. We We don't often get to worship because we're worried about this or that. You know when my little manger time is? This is interesting to me. When the last service is over, my whole family's already gone home, and I get in the car by myself, and I live about 6 miles from here in East Memphis. And I get in the car and immediately try to find a station that's playing Christmas music. Not the Frosty the Snowman music, but some carols. And my manger time is that 12 to 15 minutes that it takes me to get home, where I think and I pray and I thank God and I reflect upon what God's done in my life. Now, that's pretty lame when you think about it, but it is sacred time to me. Find your time sometime. Find your time sometime this week to kind of pull up by the manger. And be assured of this, when that last service is over, the 9 o'clock service, this week on Thursday night, you can rest assured, if you see me driving down Walnut Grove, I'm listening to some music, and I'm having my little manger time. Let's pray together.